Bongani, my brother, you good?
I'm easy, brother. How you
Thank you
doing?
for being here, man.
Yeah. No, tell them that you tied me up outside. You
You're
have
so
to be
quick.
here. You don't
You're
have
so
a
quick with the
choice.
whips, bro. But thank you for being
Joke.
here, man. Let's start with Ungubane. Who is Bongani?
Who is Bongani?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a certain avenue you're trying to lead me down, and I don't like that angle. I'm not the biggest fan of that angle.
Please, man. We need to know.
But geez, yeah, I feel like there's so many facets. But as far as the internet is concerned, Bongani is a software engineer. In my 20s, trying to figure this life thing out, man. Trying to figure this life thing out. I've always had a lot to say.
Yeah.
So it only makes sense that I've ended up on a podcast.
This is your first one.
This is my first podcast, believe it or not. Yeah, no pressure. No pressure. I just shouldn't say anything incriminating. Right? But yeah, no, I've always had a lot to say, man. And I think I grew up in a world where the internet allowed for people like me to have a voice. So I've been using TikTok to do that. Just sort of like sharing my experiences with people.
And how did you get onto that?
Do you know what the thing is, right? TikTok was never something that I wanted to start. I never said, Sasa, I'm going to wake up and become a TikToker. It was just like, I just started posting nonsense. And then I realized that, this is a platform that would be better used with, if I'm a bit more vocal about what I want to say. And then I just started speaking.
What type of nonsense were you posting at first?
Oh, man, just like random videos, me doing like nonsense, on songs and stuff. And then over time, I just started sharing the things that I'm really into.
And what was the shift from like posting nonsense to like, oh, okay, cool, I can post the things I actually like on you?
It was actually on my mom's birthday, I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I went to the gym early that morning. And I was like, let me record this, let me share this, right? Because it's just like, I like it. Let's create something out of it. Then I put that video up, and then I just kept putting more and more videos up, man. Yeah.
And when did you start like making tech videos?
Tech videos were about a year ago, right? So that one came up because it was just like, listen, man, I felt like there was so much that I'm picking up at work, and whenever I spark a conversation with someone and I'd mention I'm in software, they'd be like, okay, what is that? Tell me about it, let's get into it. So I was like, okay, you know what, sure, it's clear that this is something people want to know about.
Yeah.
And I'll try my absolute best to be as authentic as I possibly can about it. So I didn't want to bore people with like too much of the boring detail stuff. I wanted people that already had somewhat of an interest, and then I just piqued that interest by sharing the stuff that I was into.
Yeah.
And for some, it sort of carried them. Well, maybe carry is a bit of a big word, but for some, it sort of gave them the motivation they needed to get started, to get into it. And then because of that, I started working with brands and that sort of stuff, and we've been able to put out like a couple bursaries. We've been able to get people free certifications and that sort of stuff, and it's just grown over time.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
What are the misconceptions that people usually have with software development when they first talk to you?
I think it's not even a misconception. It's just like they're scared of it.
Really?
Yeah, because like software, like what is that? How do we even? The idea of it is so intimidating. Like it's a difficult thing to get through. But I like I said this in one of my videos. Think of it like you're learning a language, bro. But like seriously, the syntax may be different. There might be jargon that's limited to this language that's not in this language. And if you treat it like that, and because like languages have rules, you know what I'm saying? Like if I'm going to be speaking in the plural, I have to say us. I can't say I or two I's. No, it's we. Same thing with code. There's sort of a structure that you have to sort of approach. And I think if that's how you look at it, it's quite easy to pick up.
And what do you find is the type of person that usually gravitates to tech or finds it easier to understand the concepts?
Curious people. Yeah, you're a curious person.
I like to think so.
Yeah, curious people. So you need to have like a knack for just wanting to figure things out. Like it helps if you're curious in your own life. If you just always have the desire to sort of figure out how things work.
But then there's different types of curiosity. There's like an artistic type of curiosity, people that are curious and are able to bring things into life in an artistic form.
Sure.
And then there's people that have a mathematical curiosity. They have an obsession with numbers.
Yeah.
So is someone that is more mathematical type of curious or creative type of curious better for tech, in your opinion?
That's the beautiful thing about tech. I think there's room for both, bro. I honestly think there's room for both. If you're like the more mathematically inclined, sort of technical kind of person, you could jump into back-end dev. You could jump into, solutions architecture. There's cloud. There's, all that sort of stuff. But if you're more on the creative side and you sort of are artistic about it, there's an entire career dedicated to front-end development. And if you don't want to get into the technicalities of front-end development, there's user experience design. You know what I'm saying? Where in your curiosity, you sort of still get to exercise that curiosity on both ends of the spectrum,
Yeah.
So I think curiosity as just like a fundamental is a great place to start. Doesn't necessarily matter how it manifests itself. No.
It's interesting that you bring up curiosity as being like one of the driving things if you want to get into tech, because I know a lot of people that had misconceptions of what it meant to be a software developer, or back in the day there was like a differentiation between software development and network and computer science, which was more mathematical, and the physics side of it. And the people that ended up going into IT that then had to decide, are they going to go into software development or communication networks or support services? It was grouped into one thing, and they found that, actually, I'm not good at software development. I'm good at communication networks. So I'm not good at communication networks. I'm good at process management, which is more suitable for support-based roles. And those people kind of ended up in the middle of nowhere.
You reckon?
Yeah, they ended up in the middle. I know too many people that I studied with that are not doing anything related to tech at a high level.
Really?
Yeah, like they went into tech thinking or having one idea of what it means.
Yeah.
And the path that they ended up on set them to a very sad road where they ended up just working in a call center.
Yeah.
Or being the IT guy in an office.
Yeah.
And these are people that did software development and didn't necessarily have the right motivations maybe when they went into tech, that they ended up just at the very basic level when they went into the working road.
Yeah. So, geez, man, but I that's so interesting. I think I'm yet to come across someone who's in the workplace with a tech degree that doesn't necessarily love what they do. Or maybe it's because, when you have conversations about people and, as we speak, like, I'll catch you on a Thursday afternoon on a long week. Even you'll have bad things to say about your job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I think, if anything, the beautiful thing about sort of being in a position like that is I feel like tech has enough branches that you can grab on to sort of pivot your career, don't you think?
Yeah, especially now. Like, I would agree with that now. But in a world, when I went into my studies, like cloud services and cloud technology was not, it wasn't a thing. It was a thing overseas, but not here. Yeah. And so when I began my degree in January of 2011.
Damn. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My fault. I'm so sorry.
But when I began my degree, I remember the coursework that we had had nothing to do with cloud technology, had nothing to do with cloud services. It was all prem, and because I was doing communication networks. So I was always in some lab with a rack of devices, configuring them manually and all,
Yeah.
And by the time I graduated with my BTech in 2015, the landscape had changed, like instead of being a traditional on-prem engineer, everything was like hybrid systems where you kind of had to be a DevOps engineer,
and not just like on-prem.
Yeah, and I don't think the universities at the time or the people that I went to school with were prepared for that shift because you were being educated for 4 years for one particular role, and then you found yourself in a situation where if you didn't have the curiosity enough at the beginning to know what actually, to see the different branches you could take, you just ended up in this sad road I was talking about, where I know so many people that are so qualified and they are still that traditional IT guy in the office. My thing is not working. You know, so that's the part for me that's kind of sad when it comes to tech, because people have conceptions of what it means to be in tech, and the real world might not meet those conceptions that they have, you know, and they find themselves in a place where, honestly, I don't think you need a degree to do certain roles in tech. Even today, I don't think you need a degree to be a software developer now.
To be,
you know,
100%.
Like, you could just go on YouTube and start learning code, and it will take you somewhere.
But sorry to interrupt.
No.
Right. So that's the thing. I definitely think you don't need a degree to get into tech, but also it's important to note that I feel like companies look for these degrees because it's just them protecting themselves at the end of the day. It's a skill, you know what I'm saying? It's like even akin to bricklaying, for example. It's just like you start off, you don't know how to do it, you get taught how to do it, you correct, you make some mistakes, and then you understand the risk of making mistakes at different points of this project. Like if you're going to build a wall and one brick is out of place, it's fine if one brick is out of place here, but if you build on that, then your entire thing is skewed. Do you know what I'm saying? Similarly, like on a fundamental level, the same principles apply in tech. And it's just like, you know, for a company to say, I want someone with maybe a bachelor's or an honors degree, it's them saying, okay, I trust these institutions and the certifications that they provide, and I trust that at the very least, you should be able to know how to build a wall. Right? Build a wall and make it stand up straight. And you know, it's unfortunate that, you know, on the other side of this, it's people that, you know, really need these jobs, and that's a barrier of entry. That's just the world that we live in at the current moment.
I think a degree, one thing that a degree does, it tells a potential employer that you finished something. Like, you can start something and you can finish it. You know, that's the main value that a qualification gives you. Unfortunately, at the same time, the qualification might give the perception to others that you know a bit more than you might really, you know, because I know a lot of people that are straight out of university that go into a role, and I'm like, you don't know nothing. You know,
I was one of those people.
I was one of those people.
But you know what the thing is, right? There's definitely a gap between what university teaches you and what the workplace expects. And that gap, that's the inexperience gap that a lot of people sort of jump into. And as soon as you get into it, more often than not, people, instead of acknowledging that it's just a lack of experience, they tend to think, oh no, I'm stupid. You know, you just came out with an honors degree, hey, and now you've convinced yourself that you're dumb because you couldn't figure out a concept. You know, it's the transition. It's the transition. I think that's what gets a lot of graduates.
What's interesting and what can get graduates that going to internships or roles in the tech industry is you'll find a lot of people that might not have the fancy degree that you have, but they know so much, bruh. Like there's always, if you are starting out in tech in some company, you're going to find some dude with a beard and a hoodie and sweatpants and shoes that look old as hell. And that bra probably knows more than the executives at that company about the services that company provides, you know? And you'll talk to that bra and he probably never has a matric, you know, maybe might have some qualification that might not be even related to IT or tech, but he's so good at what he does, you know. So for me, the curiosity part is a real 100%. It's if you are not curious about the thing that you do, if it's a chore to do it, they might just find something else. Find something else, because tech is not for you. Because if you're not curious in tech, you will be irrelevant within a year of graduating. You're probably
that's a big word, but I get you.
Like honestly though, and depending on the institution that you went to, because some institutions they do not really care for you as much
Yeah,
as
they're
you
not
might
necessarily
think,
giving back.
like you're just a number. You're just a number that they've nurtured from whatever year to X amount of year that unfortunately is going to be a representative of that institution. And if that institution did not put in the time to make sure that you are a good ambassador of them, then askis. But if you go into that institution, whether it's a crappy institution or not, with the curiosity that you were speaking of,
You'll come
come out of there.
and you'll do great things.
You know, like I know people that have their own startups now that are doing extremely well, that went to universities that if I mention the names, they'll be like, what? Like, what?
Yeah.
No way. But then, you went to this top whatever university and you didn't have the curiosity, and now you just middle level, whatever, after 10 years of being in the industry. And the dude that comes from the lesser institution in your mind, but did have the motivation and the curiosity needed to thrive in the role, they are above you, you know. And that's one of the beauties, I think, the 21st century or the fourth industrial revolution gives us. You could in America, they're trying to turn truck drivers into coders. Like, have you seen that?
I haven't
Bro.
How does...
Bro. So they're trying to move away from this economy of... so they're trying to industrialize.
Sure.
So a lot of people are losing their jobs that traditionally did not need a university qualification. They're shutting down mines. They are closing down trucking, logistic companies for automated trucks and whatnot. So they're trying to re-educate people, their citizens, staff, whatever, to accumulate this new market that we find ourselves in. And so there's a lot of stories coming out of the US of truck drivers or people that just had a high school qualification being retrained into tech. The unfortunate thing with that is it might work for some people, but for the vast majority, I don't think that is possible, especially in a developing economy such as South Africa. I cannot I cannot see a miner from some South African mining company being able to take on the concepts that software development or coding might need them to grasp or understand if the only formal education they had was maybe grade 7 or grade 9 or something like that.
But then that's because it's just a barrier, like sort of like a learning gap.
Not even a learning gap. It's bigger than that. I mean, if you are the product of a first world country like England or the United States, just the standard to which you have been held up to, even in the public institutions that have nurtured you, are probably better than us. I know when I was in university, I had a maths class that was taught by a German lady. And she used to talk about how the maths we were doing in second year was basically the maths they do in primary school in Germany. you know, like what? What are you saying to us? You know, so I definitely think there is a level of you need to have an aptitude
to get into it.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, but I feel like that sort of opens into something else, right? In the grander scheme of things, isn't that the case with just all life in general? I feel like that's it. Like the what determines your ability to succeed or fail at whatever it is you do is the exposure that you've had within that sort of thing that you're trying to achieve.
Okay.
Right? It's just like if I, at 5 years old, my parents started taking me to football practice, right? And I play football grade 1, grade 2, all the way up until grade 8, 9, 10. And then you, for example, let's say you played it socially, like, you know, with your homies or whatever. And then we get to first team tryouts in matric. Who's going to do better? Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's just life. It's what you've been exposed to and what you can...
Okay, do you think aptitude has any influence on how well you do on something?
To a certain extent.
To a certain
extent. Right? There's just like, you know, some people have like a natural aptitude.
Yeah.
It boils in inside of them. They wake up and, you know, they can take charge at these things. But for other people, your environment has been curated. It's been sort of shaped to help you develop, you know, the ability to take on certain challenges. And I just think that stems from, you know, the family you grew up in, the school you went to. There's so many factors that ultimately decide where you end up in life.
So are you a proponent of nurture over nature?
Yeah, 100%. Nature is vicious, man. Nature's vicious. It's full of so much wrath. But it's not forgiving.
Yeah, I agree there. But then I think you could. LeBron James wouldn't be LeBron James if he was 6'1".
Sure.
You know?
Fair.
So nature plays its part. We are predisposed to our genes.
Yeah.
And we do not give that enough credit.
Yeah.
And so some of us might have the aptitude for tech or medicine or higher forms of learning or thinking because of our genes.
100%.
You know? And then some of us might not have those genes, but the environment we were born into
sort of
kind of allowed it. That thing where kids that were raised by rich parents are more likely to be rich even if they're stupid than kids that were raised by poor parents, even if they might be the smartest person ever. Like the micro expressions, the micro facial, like just the things you pick up in your environment really shape you. Ultimately. But then at the same time, the genetic makeup of who you are plays a huge role. Like I believe it's maybe 51% of the nature of the person that determines who they are. Like there are kids. There are studies that show that kids that are adopted by parents later exhibit traits that their biological parents had, even though they've never met them, their biological parents. They might tend to name their pets a certain name that their parents might have, you know, more likely have chosen for their own pets when they were kids.
And they never met them.
And they never met them, you know? So I believe really like at the very minimum, 51% of who we become is determined by who we are, by our genetic makeup.
So, but you know what, but you see, now that's the thing. I can't necessarily speak to someone naming their pets the same thing their parents would have, because it's just like, how do you justify that? Can you say that there's a gene that's responsible for storing potential pet names that you might? You get what I'm saying? It's difficult to justify, but I'm not going to negate the reality that these things happen, guys. It's as much as technical and as pragmatic as you can be. We live in this world we haven't figured all of it out, to be quite honest with you. So it's just like, when stuff like that happens, sure, I can't speak to it. But let's look at it like this. Do you know what I'm saying? LeBron James is LeBron James because he's 6 foot, I don't know.
6'8", I think.
Do you know what I'm saying? He's LeBron James because he's 6'8", and he was born in America. And he was born at a time where people of his, you know, genetic makeup were likely to get into that sport. And he just so happened to find the right coach. Everything, I'm not saying that LeBron James is LeBron James because he was destined to be LeBron James. I'm saying that everything that happened in LeBron's life had to happen exactly the way that it did in order for him to become LeBron James. If he was born in Congo, where it's war-torn, do you think he's ending up in the NBA? Absolutely not, right? It's, yes, you're 6'7", but you're 6'7" in Congo. Do you get what I'm saying? You're no longer going to be a basketball player. You might do something else, and if it helps, like, it's just like, do you know what I'm saying? It's the reason why currently the disproportionate majority of wealth worldwide exists in people that are in a certain age range is because they were alive at the right time when the right opportunities were exposed. Like, let's say there was an industrial revolution where we're building railways in South Africa, and you just so happen to have the funding needed to do something like that immediately, just because of circumstances around you. You know what I'm saying? It helps. So it's just like, it's a bit of both, I would say. Okay. It's like it's nature, but definitely nurture.
I would say it's 51% nature. And nature takes the 49%. Like, honestly, we were speaking when we met at Starbucks of our postgrad research.
Yeah.
Which mine was on the biases that exist in algorithms,
Sure.
the people that write them,
Yeah.
you know? So if the algorithm is written by people that are mostly of a specific gender and mostly of a specific ethnic group, you then can suspect that the algorithms they produce are going to be more biased of the beliefs that those people hold about anything or whatever it might be. There, it's less about the nurture, but the nature to which everything existed. You know, so you might write an algorithm that says, show me all the numbers that are not prime numbers that are out there. You know, and it will show you.
Sure.
It will show you that. But then, as soon as you add something, a level of subjectivity to that, where show me all the numbers that most likely show me all the numbers that have won the lottery in the past 100 years.
Yeah.
You know, that's also random, but
Fine.
then in the randomness of that, I've lost my train. I've lost my fucking train of thought.
It's okay.
But let's talk about your postgrad.
My postgrad research.
Yeah.
So my postgrad research was actually such a non-technical thing, right? So I got my bachelor's of computing, which is a 4-year degree. But in your 4th year, so it's an NQF level 8, so it's an honors degree.
Okay.
So in your 4th year, you do like your honors level research and that sort of stuff. And then, you know, they sort of gave us our options, and then people wanted to build AI models, data science, this and this. To be quite honest with you, that stuff, it's like, don't get me wrong, like, I can do the technical stuff, but I prefer the soft skill stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, okay, cool. Let's do our postgrad research on user experience design. But I picked particularly social media and sort of the tactics that user experience designers that work for these social media organizations, the tactics that they employ to sort of keep you on your apps.
What type of tactics?
So now that's the thing, right? So let's break it down. So you look at your biggest apps or the apps that you use, you know, the most. If you're 80% of the population, this is a number that I'm just thumb sucking. It's probably going to be a social media application. It's going to be your Facebook, your TikToks, your Instagram, and that sort of stuff, right? Which is cool because, you know, it's fun to be on there. But then don't you think it's concerning that the apps that we spend the most of our time on, like those apps are free? Telling me these organizations, they're so generous, hey? Instagram went out of their way to build this app and they gave it to me and they said, here you go, enjoy. What's in it for Instagram?
The data.
Exactly, right? These are just all data mining organizations. There's a very real reason why, and check it out next time, right? So I forgot if it was TikTok or Instagram. There's an update that they made where if you're scrolling, I think, on your For You page, if it's TikTok or your Reels on Instagram, you can't see the time anymore.
Really?
Yeah, you can't see the time. The time's been removed.
When was this?
I'll show you after on my personal page,
okay.
so you know I'm not talking nonsense. But you can't see the time anymore, right?
Yo.
It's these small design tweaks that sort of keep you narrowed in, sort of focused in on your screen. It's their objective to hone you on this. Because ultimately, with every like, with every comment, with shares, saves and that sort of stuff, your algorithm knows more about you.
Yeah.
So now it knows, you know, Dibza likes cars. He likes things that are full of adrenaline. So whenever we are approached by an organization, we have enough data to give like proper estimations about the adverts that we're going to send to people. It can show me a Red Bull ad because, you know, people that like cars and like adrenaline are more likely to buy energy drinks. You know, they can start making informed decisions because ultimately these are just all advertising companies. No more billboards that people drive past, but no, they put the advert on your phone and you're the one that goes to it. Do you get what I'm saying? So it was just like, that's what sparked me. It's like, geez, man, it's so concerning. And once you start doing the research, it's sketchy.
It's
bro.
a rabbit hole.
It is sketchy.
There's a story from the US of a girl whose parents found out she was pregnant. because based on her web searches, the local grocery store sent her house coupons for baby stuff.
Is one.
I'm like, what? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So that's the world we live in. In my master's research, we were looking at the biases that exist in algorithms, and how there's so many academic papers that showed in the early days of Google that if you were Googling black people are, and then it would auto-finish it with everything that's negative, because on the internet,
that's the information.
That's the information that exists over there. So, and a practical example of this was I was at a friend's place in Midrand, and I was trying to get an Uber home. The name on my Uber app is Itumeleng. That's my name. I'm standing as far as you are with me with this guy. When I request, the price was $170 to go home. Sure. And I would request, I couldn't find a driver. But when he was requesting for my address, and we are standing right next to each other, and he has an English name on his app, it was 50 Rand cheaper.
Really?
And we found a driver within 2 minutes.
Really?
Bro.
Wow.
Bro. Wow. So my research was basically saying that there are biases that exist in the algorithms that run our lives. Yeah. And they exist because the people that write them are of a certain gender or a certain ethnicity, and the data of which these agents are learning these behavior from is bad data, because the data that exists out there on the internet is bad. You know, if everything that's negative about black people is on the internet, and you're expecting an AI agent to learn from the internet, then it's going to think that anything that's black is bad. You know, anything that's not English is good or bad or whatever. So, whoa, like what you just said is just
it's terrifying. And I think that's why I'm a firm advocate for getting off social media as often as possible. Like, it's so ironic to have someone with a big following,
a huge following,
telling not really your way, come on. But I believe in this stuff, man. And it's also why I hate it when people call me a TikToker. I'm not a TikToker. I have a TikTok account the same way everyone else on TikTok has a TikTok account. But it's my pinned video. It's like, take as many breaks from social media as much as you possibly can. Because it's also such a, you think about it, man, it's a very inhumane thing to do. Nowhere in nature is it ever natural for, a creature with our build and our shape and our mobility to sit and, you know what I'm saying? It's just not normal. And I just feel like, be aware, be conscious of the time that you're spending on here, and, the content that you're consuming. Because, this life thing can get so difficult. It's just like, part of my research, it was just basically talking about like some of the harmful effects, of spending. So it looked at what these designers do to get you to spend time on these apps, and the consequences of spending time on these apps. And more often than not, and like quite literally in every sort of comparable metric that we used, we found that people were just negatively impacted by the time that they spent on here. Let's say, for example, Dumeling, things aren't going too well for myself at the moment, and, I get on TikTok or Instagram, and then I just start looking at you, man. You got this nice podcast. Things are working out for you. It's normal to start projecting feelings of insecurity over myself because of these things. And in a normal world, you can sort of get away from it. Let's say I see you at work or I see you at school. I can sort of, for that 15 or 10 hours or so that we're together, sure. And then I go back home. But now I'm taking it with me. You know what I'm saying? And then I'm looking at these videos and I hate this guy. You know what I'm saying? But now, what does the algorithm do? It'll show me more people like you, because clearly I'm invested in this content. And what happens? My next scroll is another person that's doing great, and another person that's doing great. What am I doing? I'm effectively just burying myself in constant reminders that I'm nowhere where I need to be in life and that sort of stuff. And then before you know it, bro, you're miserable. You know what I'm saying?
It's unfortunate how these big tech companies have hijacked the vulnerabilities that exist in the human psyche, because okay, we live in the 21st century,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But then we are still no more different than the caveman that came out of the caves like 12, 20,000 years ago. Like, we honestly no different from that.
You
because,
reckon?
yeah, like you just mentioned that we tend to focus on the negatives.
Yeah.
Why is that? That is because if we took away the privileges that we enjoy in the 21st century world, air conditioning,
Yeah.
cars,
Yeah.
The internet, whatnot, it was just us and nature.
Yeah.
You really had to be aware of the possibility of danger coming.
Sure.
You know,
100%.
you really had to be aware that there could be an attack at any moment.
At any given
you
moment.
know, and evolutionary speaking, that was an advantage because you had to then prepare for the worst case scenario. In the 21st century, that means your neighbor buying a better car than you. You know, that's the worst thing that can happen to you because now you've cemented this idea that I am so pathetic. Why am I not buying a new car? Or you see the post of someone working out. I'm so pathetic. Why am I not working out? When you can. You should be.
You should be. Why beg? And I think that you sort of led right into what I was about to say, right? The onus lies on you. It's your responsibility to take control of how you feel. Do you know what I'm saying? And, you know, I don't think anyone can stop an emotion from emerging, but they can create an environment where it's difficult for that emotion to emerge. It's your responsibility at the end of the day. And I just wish people were a bit more conscious about this.
Yeah.
You see it now in how comfortable people are saying horrible things on the internet.
Bro.
How free they feel.
Bro.
Just they're open. It's you know, it's like there's not a chance you would say this to this person to their face. Not a chance. But because you've allowed yourself to get, you know, consumed by the negative narratives that you're reading into, and you sort of, I think people that are horrible on the internet are just projecting how they feel about themselves. That's the honest truth. Like, there are normal things that normal people do, and there are abnormal things that abnormal people do. Let's be honest. You know what I'm saying?
There's a paper that I read a few months ago that shows that the state of mind that people find themselves in when they're on social media is almost the exact as the state of mind people find themselves in when they have road rage. Because when you are driving, one of the things that's happening is you are aware that you are in a very unnatural state. You know, you are traveling at 100 kilometers
in a metal box.
You know, in a metal box, and anything that was to happen traveling at those speeds is over. You know, and so when you have someone who is changing lanes without indicating, you're so like, hyper focused, like, could have killed me, you know? And on social media, it's the same thing. Like, you are so triggered by everything that is negative because naturally that's what we are prone to pay attention to. You know, I used to take breaks from social media, and the latest one was I came back to Instagram after like a 6-month hiatus last month. And for me, I am unable to remove myself from getting sucked into,
like, sort of,
you know, like I get sucked into this perfectly curated image of myself that I've created on Instagram, where I work out, I run, I take walks, I read, I do all these things, I work, you know, normal things. But then as soon as I post too much of these things on social media, the question that comes to me is, did I take that walk so that I can post it? Or did I want to take that walk? Did I go to the gym because I wanted to post it? Or
did I actually
you know, so I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I need to step back so that I can rediscover the reasons why I do the things that I do. And a good friend of mine was saying what you're saying, where you still have the opportunity on social media to curate what you want to see. If you are saying, baddies and whatnot. It's because that's
That's
like
you.
the camera on that phone is seeing that the microseconds you are spending on that one clip
On
at
that
the
one
corner
clip,
there, you
yeah.
know. And so I've gotten to a point now where if I see something that I know is gonna trigger me, I go to him like not interested. Now the things that I see are the things that I wanna see, and it becomes easier to stay a bit longer on social media. But then eventually you fall back into that same trap of okay, I went on a run this morning, and it like it's just been a month since I've been back on Instagram, and it's coming back to me like, did I run because I wanted to, or because I'm gonna post about it? You know, and that as soon as that feeling comes into my mind, I get this thing of maybe it's time to step back.
It's time to take a little bit. Yeah. That's actually so important. But I think, you know, this is something that, again, I wish more and more people would be a bit more conscious about the things that they do.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's but I don't blame you for falling into that, right? We live in a very decentralized world, in my honest opinion.
Decentralized?
Yeah.
How so?
Like in reality, not in your phone, but in actual reality.
Okay.
I think, and this comes, it's a multitude of things, right? I think living in the suburbs, you quickly realize that sense of community that you might have had growing up quickly
is not there.
It diminishes. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you might not necessarily talk to your neighbors the same way you would or something like that. You know, I think when my grandmother was alive, you know, it would always be Sasvalashile, it would be all my cousins and that sort of stuff. And then before you know it, Ngisho next door. You know, it's just a vibe. You get what I'm saying? But then, you know, we're living in a bit more of a modern age, and as you sort of develop in your modernity, things just get smaller, and you know, you get smaller, your community gets smaller, you go to the gym, there's AirPods in, you're not really talking to people. Do you get what I'm saying? And you know, there's less of a personal real life support structure, and then, you know, losing that makes us gravitate to our phones instead of picking up the call, because now I don't want to bother Debs, man, let me just I'll put the phone down. So you end up in your phone, and then you eventually start building a community there, right? You start building a world where they love me for who I'm showing them to be. You know, why not? It's a good feeling, you know. Why not capitalize on that? Why not make it a bit easier for them to access you and that sort of stuff? But we tend to forget that in doing that, you are quite literally losing the essence of who you are as a person, because you're no longer doing things because they make you happy, or it's what you enjoy. You're doing things because you want the validation. So you post, and then an hour later, you're refreshing. You want to see the likes come in. It's crack. It's dopamine, bro. It's yeah, just like I get some of that, right? And that's what a part of my study touched on as well. It's just like, it's ridiculous. But, you know, we could go on and on and on. But I just think about the fact that when you're on social media, sorry to just diverse a little bit. When you're on social media, bro, and like you're on your For You page, and you scroll, in a minute, you could see, how many videos, you know, let's say 50 or 40 videos. That's 50 okay, sure, if you're a slow scroller, that's 40 to 50 different things, completely unrelated, no context shared between the two, just random rapid fire things to shoot at you. What does that do to your brain? Where else in the world, in nature, do you have to deal with something like that? I'd say maybe driving, because, you know, there's like a lot of cars you have to be. But also driving, I wouldn't say might necessarily be it, because we're a bit more careful. I know that you don't want to hit me, I don't want to hit you. So I'd even argue that you can be a bit more relaxed. And
driving's regulated.
You know what I'm saying? It's regulated. There's rules and stuff. It's a baddie. It's someone that was shot like in, you know, somewhere. It's that building that just fell in George. It's this, it's that, it's the war, it's this, it's that. What does that do to your emotion? All of these things are, you know what I'm saying? I feel like you end up being a bit dysregulated.
There's a
unregulated. Sorry.
There's so many studies that show that the more connected we've become because of the internet, the more lonely people have become. Because what you were saying is you have these communities online that they give us that remnants of belonging, but you know, it's very diluted. And the more we've been removed away from the 20th century and the family values and community values that kind of cemented in us, the lonelier we've become, because you do not have that Sunday service to go to anymore, where you're going to see all your school friends, you're going to see all your cousins, you're going to see, all your you do not have the sense of community anymore. You can live in your 1-bedroom apartment, you can order your food, you can, you really could become a hermit if you wanted to. In the 21st century, you can Uber Eats everything. Amazon is in South Africa now,
which is crazy.
You can still be healthy. You can order. You can have a home gym. You can have a treadmill and some weights. You can be on Tinder. Find some love.
You don't even need to go outside to find love anymore.
Like basically, Tinder is saying, show me people that are attractive near me.
Yeah.
And like the options that are available today are options that even kings couldn't have dreamed of in past centuries. And yet those options have alienated us from so much that took centuries to build. It took centuries to build the traditions and cultures that have shaped who we are. Because you might be Bongani or whatever, but what does it mean to be Bongani? Bongani is a Zulu name. It's a Nguni name. The Nguni culture has centuries and thousands of years of evolution that have brought you to the place that you are now. And you could undo all of that. You could be anyone you wanted to online. Especially with what's happening with Meta, Facebook now. You can be anyone you want to, bro. Like you wanna be you want to be a drug dealer or whatever, play Grand Theft Auto. You want to.
It works out.
Like it works. You can be whatever you can find a community online that is not going to judge you. But then that validation that you get from them, is it as real and as tangible as the validation that we used to get from communities? And I don't think it is. Like, I really do not think it is. I've met so many lonely people in my lifetime. Like I've met so many, especially in the industry that we were in. The more brilliant the technical architect, and the younger they are, the more lonely that person usually is, because there is that emphasis on family values of settling down by a certain age. I mean, our grandparents were married with kids by 25.
But wait now. Let's not glorify that.
Really? Why not?
They were able to do that because, one, the economy allowed for it. But let's not pretend that 25-year-olds should have been having kids to begin with.
That's a difficult one. I'll hear you out. Like, come on, talk to me.
Do you get what I'm saying? It's just like there's a video I saw on TikTok, which is funny because I'm saying get off social media. There's a video. This girl is she was mocking people that go, I can't believe my parents were able to start a family at my age. And then I think it was a stitch, and she's like, well, why do you think you are the way that you are? It's just like, these are the parents that were beating you at the dinner table because you couldn't figure out division in 3rd grade. Like, were those people that had, the best EQ? Were they the most fit people in the entire community to be having children? You get what I'm saying? But I just think that speaks to a bigger issue. That speaks to something else. I just want to touch on the loneliness part that you said. I think the reason why people end up feeling lonely after they look for validation on the internet is because a like is so less or so much. It's way more disingenuous than someone that you actually care about, someone that has real context of who you are coming to you to say, I'm proud of you. If I go to my mom and I say, yo, Mom, so here's my master's degree. This is someone who's seen me from when I was a child. They saw me make my earliest mistakes. They saw me develop and grow. They saw me build character. They saw me, learn and find myself. They quite literally saw me become the person that I am today. And they understand what it took for me to come back and say, here's my degree. Someone on the internet, remember, we're seeing 40, 50 different things. Ne? When your biggest achievement that you just posted is view number 37. I'm so serious. It's the 37th thing they've seen in this past minute. And all it takes is a doop, congrats, and then I'm back up to 38 and I've forgotten that I've seen you, an hour ago. So as much as the numbers can come in and those can be a thing, there's a and it's ironic because it's people that are liking these posts. But, the interface or the bridge between, them sharing their congratulations or whatever and me receiving it is an icon. It's an SVG.
Yeah.
It's a thing. It's not real. Do you get what I'm saying? And I feel like the more you realize that these likes and these comments and these things, they don't really mean anything.
Yeah, they don't.
Unless you work with brands, then they mean the world. Because then they care about that.
I want to get back to the EQ of past generations.
Sure. Yeah.
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's really
and you must be very careful. You must be very careful when you handle that one. You can't just speak.
Ooh, so I work remotely.
You work remotely.
I work remotely. So I have a home office upstairs, and my office overlooks like this yard area, the complex. Yeah. And every day at 3:30, latest 3:45, but every day at 3:30, before 4, there is a family that lives in the complex, young family. The guy is probably my age or maybe a year difference. And he plays with his sons every day out there while I'm sitting there preparing for my 4 p.m. meeting. And it's usually, because they're usually there at 3:30, I'm preparing for my daily 4 p.m. meeting at that time.
So that's how you sort of keep,
the experiences that they are having out there, is what you're talking about with your mom, and the difference with your mom feeling a sense of pride for your accomplishments versus some stranger online. There is value in the experiences that they are having out there that the modern world has belittled in some way. There is value in having those human connections, of building those experiences from a young age for the kids and their parents. I'm 31. I don't have that.
Yeah.
And I have to recognize that there is then something that I'm missing. Part of the reason there's something that I'm missing. Okay. We have tricked ourselves that we are so much different in the 21st century than past generations, there is so many, I read a lot, as I said, and there are so many studies that show that couples that start off the day with a conversation and a hug are much better off in terms of the emotional intelligence in the long term than people that do not have that conversation and hug. Early in the day,
action,
and so in this 21st century world that we live in, where we are not forced to settle down as early as past generations, think about the gap those missed conversations and hugs are creating in us. Why are we so lonely? We are not getting those hugs at church. Why are we so lonely? We are not getting those hugs at the grocery store because we're ordering everything online. Why are we so lonely? Because we are waiting longer to have those kids. Why are we so lonely? Because we have different standards of what it means to be ready to have kids. When back in the day, like our grandparents were making 10 rand a month and having 12 kids. It's, again, I don't think we should glorify that. I don't think we should. But I don't think we should. I'm not saying we should glorify it, but I'm saying there was value in it, because a child does not know they're poor until they're much older in life.
And then they realize, hey man, Andy, this is...
And so the upbringing that I had with my dad and mom, my siblings, is a far better life than the life that I live now, even though I might be economically better off, because by the time my dad was my age, he was already married. He had a few kids. He had his own company. He was living towards something.
Yeah.
And boy, do I question myself whenever I have an accolade that I do not have someone to share it with.
Yeah. It's
like, why am I doing all of this?
Yeah. What's the?
Okay, cool. I'm able to do so much for my mom, for my family.
Yeah.
But then at some point, my mom won't be on this planet anymore. And then what?
Yeah.
So there's value in having family.
Sure.
There's value in having family, and I understand being pensive about glorifying the family structures that existed when people had less options. But we should not throw away the baby with the bathwater. There was really value in that. The divorce rates that we have in today's society are much higher than the past, even though in the past the homes were very unequal.
Exactly, I was about to say.
And the equality that has been introduced in the 21st century has not really served us very well.
Tread carefully.
I know, but then let me make the case. Case. Bro, I'm 31.
Yeah.
I can confidently say that I would not be able to attract the type of woman that I've been able to attract if I worked at Cadbury making minimum wage. And so we cannot discount the evolutionary dictates that exist that say at some point a woman, however wealthy she might be, however independent she might be, will have to go through 9 months of incubation of a child.
Sure.
And because of that evolutionary fact, there's a cultural implication that says that the man has to be a provider.
Okay.
A man has to be a provider. And in a world where you are unable to provide to the standard to which a woman is accustomed to, then there's a hierarchy. That, okay, booty, ish.
Ngiyayibona lento
kodwa kuzoba nzima, my brother,
Yeah.
And to be respected by your woman is a very important part of a relationship. And so I understand the need to date within a certain, what do they call it, hypergamous structure.
Ooh, hypergamous, brother. No, you lost me there. Hypergamous.
Hypergamy is the social phenomenon where you find that women tend to date above.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
And my main point in all of this is the ways and customs of the past served us for much longer than the ways of today have been around. We have a track record of how things work out with past traditions. I'm not saying they're perfect, but we have a track record
Of how they
work out.
Yeah.
In the 21st century, we have a inclination to do away with them without really taking into account the consequences
of doing away with them.
And that's the main thing I'm saying here. So yeah, I do have a cautionary tale that says, be careful what you wish for. Like honestly, just be careful what you wish for when it comes to the type of life you want, because you might think the guy or the girl with the body or the qualification of this is what you want, but then what you really need might be that person you thought was not good enough for you. What you really need as a human being, the type of nurture that you need might not come in the package that you think you want, So your destiny and your happiness might be with a person that might not have the degree that you want, might be with a person that might not have the physique that you want. But we are humans, and humans have an emotional need to it. Everything must not just make sense on paper. It must be,
it's gotta.
Yeah, it must
click.
be fluid.
Sure.
It must be fluid. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, fair. I think you're not gonna get cancelled.
I mean,
I don't think you're gonna get cancelled.
This cancel culture is a bit scary, man. Like, it's scary in the sense that it is pushed by the supposedly left-leaning people in society.
Yeah.
And it has such a extreme nature to it because we are used to extremism from the right.
Sure.
And the extremism that we find from the left is so sugar-coated because we are hippie, we want everyone to be happy, but then don't say this.
Yeah.
Don't believe this, and that's not healthy. I don't think that's healthy.
Yeah. So what, do you think there's a level of censorship to...
Definitely. There's a book behind you by George Orwell called 1984.
Sure.
The world described in that book is scarily close to the world we live in.
Really?
It's scarily close to the world we live in. He talks about a world government and a form of speech or language that is very much aligned with this times that we are finding ourselves in, where you have compelled speech in the 21st century, where you are compelled to refer to people in a certain way. And if you do not refer to a person in the way that they want to be referred as, you are a bigot. That's a dangerous, slippery slope that we are walking.
Yeah.
We should never get to a point where people are compelled to discount reality for subjectivity. Yes, go ahead.
Interesting take. I suppose, I don't know if this is the same thing, but, growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up in, Sakula Nabantu of the Ndebele culture, right? And if you're familiar with Amandebele, Bayingomeni, right? They practice ubsoga effectively, in the sense that young men, wintertime, we know Utaika, you and Dabin. It's just it's a guarantee. And we'd make a whole thing out of it. We'll make we'd go and then support the families, and especially when they came back, it was a big deal. Guys were getting cars and trucks and stuff, and I'm like, hey,
where is this? Mpumalanga?
No, Broncos Braids. So Broncos Braids is just before Mpumalanga, actually. Like, she's the last town before Mpumalanga. Okay. And there's like a sort of bunch of communities that exist in there, mainly Mazulu, Amandebele. But so that would be a thing. But now when they would come back from, Engomeni, there were specific things that we, as the guys who didn't go, were supposed to do. There's certain ways you couldn't refer to them.
Okay.
There's certain things. You couldn't just be like, hey, when I'm fine. Hey, uzabekwa phansi. Fana ka gogo, akubheka then fana abani. You get what I'm saying? And I think, we can bind a cultural aspect to it and give it a bit more weight and make it a bit heavier because we respect cultural practices of transformation and say you must respect people's cultures and their beliefs. Like, what's the Xhosa word? You can't just call umuntu inkwenkwe. You know what I'm saying? Especially if, ubuya ngomeni. And they'll tell you, don't call me that. Angisayona inkwenkwe, because I've gone through this process. And we respect it, don't we?
Yeah.
But now, on the other side of things, we have people who might not necessarily go through the cultural transformation processes that we believe in and we love to carry, so religiously, to be quite honest with you. And we fail to recognize that for them it's as real as it is for us. They went through a transformation process and they demand to be treated as such. We do the same and we expect respect. But do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where's the difference? Where does it lie?
There's a huge difference.
Break it down.
There's a huge difference. It's what I'm saying, though. We have cultures and traditions that have been formed over thousands of years. That have influenced our identities. And what we were doing in the 21st century is we were taking ideas, new ideas, and saying disregard everything else.
Yeah.
We're going with this now.
Sure.
What the consequences are, we do not know. Is there a track record of doing things this way? We do not have one, but we're going with this now, and let's discount everything else. I cannot get behind that. I understand what you were saying. I grew up in the Eastern Cape.
Sure.
In the Eastern Cape, Ingwengwe, bro.
Yeah.
Like growing up as a young boy in the Eastern Cape and being a boy, being Ingwengwe, you are centimeters away from being a dog. Bro, you are centimeters.
You're at the lowest rung of the level.
You have almost no value.
Nothing.
Almost no value.
Your say doesn't have.
And whatever you might say about that, that is in that culture and has been in that culture for thousands of years.
Sure.
The thing that I am not for is anyone outside of that culture looking at that culture and saying, no, we are doing things this way now.
Sure.
Like, huh?
How did you find there was a movie, Puma?
Oh, what's it called? Ingleba.
Yeah, how did you find that movie?
So there's a misconception that people have of me because Nithet is Xhosa.
Sure.
I am not Xhosa per se.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up with Xhosa people.
Sure.
And having grown up with Xhosa people, I had the privilege of having an outsider's view while also being inside of the culture and the customs and whatnot. And so any attack against the culture for me was not an attack on me, you know? And so, or anything that was perceived as an attack, which that film was by many quarters within that community. My dad is Tswana. But he has a whole history that during apartheid, his family were classified, were reclassified like 4 different times as Northern Sotho, colored, I think even white at some point because of his mom, and then in '94 as black, you know, and then I grew up looking the way that I look, speaking isiXhosa in a community of predominantly Xhosa people. And so my name and my clan name, my heritage was something that was always like, in that community, you know? But I never identified as being Umxhosa, even though I speak the language. And not identifying as being Umxhosa really helped me to have like a very removed introspection about things, you know, because I was able to take myself out of the situation and look at it very objectively and see the subjectivity that exists within it. And after seeing that as a young child, it made it easier for me to see the subjective nature of the world and why certain people believe certain things, you know, and unfortunately when they believe those things that are heavily influenced by their religion or culture or whatever, they then mistake those things as being part and parcel of objective reality.
Which it definitely isn't.
Definitely isn't. So it made it easier for me to view things as being a bit removed from them, you know. So what was the point again?
So I asked you, you were about to say what you're against is people from outside of the culture looking in. I asked you about Ingleba and then you spoke about it. No, but it's a good tangent. I like the fact that, you know, conversations don't necessarily need a straight line
definitely. But with regards to Ingleba and the greater conversation that we were having, I mean, we were speaking about compelled speech, and you made reference of Ingoma and how in that culture or area that you grew up in, there was an understanding to respect what people wanted to be referred to as because of that conditioning in that area. For me, that's different from what's happening now.
Yeah.
Because what's happening now does not have the track record of Ingoma and the origins and significance of it. You know, Ingoma has been something that's been around for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. Ukwaluka has been around for thousands of years, definitely.
Sure.
And for us to impose new ideas on a people's beliefs without taking into account the cultural significance it has on them, man, that is too dismissive for me. Especially when we are told we have to think of history from the context of the times.
Sure.
And so slavery, as appalling as it was a natural thing during the 16th and 15th centuries, you know?
It was a vibe.
You know, it was a vibe.
It was a vibe. They built countries. Let's not call it a thing. They built countries off of slavery.
But then
civilization.
But then it's okay for us to say those people and their views, what to be expected of that time, because it's something that's isolated to that period. And yet in the 21st century, we do not have the same appreciation and respect for the beliefs and customs of the people that live now, and we are saying forget that. Forget that when indoda yomzulu, indoda yomvenda, whatever, phuma lapho. You have to buy into this ideology, and if you don't, you are a bigot. No, that's crazy. I can't get with that one. I really cannot get with that one, because where does it go?
You see, but now here's the thing about the human species. We're clearly very resilient, right? And I think how long has our species been around? I don't know.
Like 300,000 years.
Do you get what I'm saying? What else has been around that long? Like trees and alligators, right? Other things just didn't necessarily last as long. I think when a species has survived this long, it has survived this long for a reason. You can call it divine intervention, you can call it this, you can call it luck, you can call it science, evolution, whatever, it's up to you. And the beautiful thing about the human species is that we're so disconnected in our beliefs. I don't think there's ever been a period where we as people have been able to come and sit down and come to an agreement to say, this is how things should be done. And everyone was like, good shot. It's never happened, right? We've always come from 1,000 different points. And there's no way to stop that. There's never been a way to stop that. You know, there was a time when bikinis were taboo, where if you wore a bikini, I can't swear on this, but you were a horrible person. That's what you would have been. Do you get what I'm saying? And now, just go search up your favorite OnlyFans model. And you can see unspeakable things, right? It's almost as if humanity has been defined by our transformative periods, for better or for worse. But there's never actually been a way to stop it. And if we did stop it, it took a collective agreement between, amongst a significant number of people for it to actually carry weight. If it weren't for resistance, or if it weren't for the fact that South Africa went bankrupt, I'm pretty sure apartheid would have still thrived and flourished today. Do you get what I'm saying? But it took a collective effort of people to stand up and say, this is what we believe things should be. And they were willing to go to the furthest of extremes to get to what they wanted.
But do you think it was as fast as things are happening now?
And now that's the thing, right? Things are moving so much quicker now. It's easy to get a movement going. It's easy to get anything going. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think that's part of the evolutionary process of being a human being. We're so integrated with tech that we can't be shocked when things pick up like wildfires. And the unfortunate truth is, as much as it could be great for good movements, it's just as quick for movements that aren't necessarily as good. You know what I'm saying? A lie could spread like this, or let's say someone's pictures leak and they're in a compromised position. Now it's all over the world. Ultimately, what I'm saying is, as much as a people we're changing, and it's quick, the change that we go through, it's inevitable. You're never going to constrict a group of people, and even inside a home, the siblings of that home can't come to an agreement about certain things. And we could go on and on and on about, the potential damages that it can cause. I think ultimately can we at the very least agree that all human beings deserve equal treatment? Do you get what I'm saying? Because we can come and we can discuss the nuances of things at the moment, but from where we are right now, less than 20 Ks, less than 15 Ks from here, it's kids, bro. Kids that probably might not have even ate anything today. You get what I'm saying? It breaks my heart that we get so caught up in our beliefs and your beliefs and all of this stuff. Right now, there's bombs dropping on children. Bombs. And the world is like, okay.
Hey, bro.
The world is like, it's politics. We can't get involved.
That's a weird one.
We can't get involved.
That's a
Do you get
weird
what
one.
I'm saying? And I feel like to a certain extent, as much as culture matters, as much as religion matters, as much as, it's important ukwazi imvelaphi yakho and to practice the things that make you you. I believe in that wholly and firmly. We all have our beliefs. Go exercise them rightfully so. It's a shame that we've let that divide us to the point where we've even stopped caring about the people that don't even have the privilege to care about these things. Because if your only problem at the end of the day is, will I have a roof over my head? Do you care about the LGBT community? Do you care about amaXhosa going engomeni? No, you're hungry. You're hungry and you need a place to stay. And I feel like those people have just been marginalized. We've tossed them out and we have 1,000 different conversations going on. But the people who have it the worst, they left out. You know what I'm saying?
Part of the things that I foresee happening with the speed of how things are progressing in societies is previously disadvantaged groups are going to be left behind in this fourth industrial revolution that's happening, because we are already speaking about the meta universe.
Yeah.
We're already speaking about artificial reality or artificial intelligence and all this. And yet 10 kilometers away from here is Mamelodi. And there is thousands of kids there that do not even have a basic internet connection. Basic internet connection.
Or access to it.
Yeah. But already within the same country, within 10 kilometers of Mamelodi,
The Silver Lakes.
there is a gaming store in Silver Lakes that has this amazing VR thing that I think it's like $100. You in there for like 15-20 minutes and it is amazing,
Cool.
bro.
Yeah.
But then 100 rand we tola P Mamelodi. When you have in most townships guys that will spend the entire day asking for a 5 bob to buy cigarettes, and they will smoke different cigarettes from different people, and at the end of the day they probably smoke like 2 cigarettes in total.
And it's so. You see, now we're going to touch into something that's a humanitarian part of me that I care a lot about.
Okay.
Right? I feel like we need more humanitarian graduates. We don't need more. We need more humanities graduates, not necessarily more engineers. No. Let me break it down. Let me break it down. Right? It's, and this is gonna sound so horrible. When you drive past wherever you're driving past, and then I'm sure you've heard this narrative before. It's easy. It's so easy to be like, why am I giving you this money? You're gonna buy drugs, right? And sometimes I tend to think about it, and I'm like, geez, if I were homeless, I'd probably do drugs too. I'd probably do more drugs than anyone, if we're being completely honest. Can you imagine, Can you imagine just how devastating life must be for you as a grown man in your 40s, 50s even? You get what I'm saying? If as you're in your 40s and your 50s, you're still hustling for 50 cents to get a cigarette, I just think that's a sign of a significantly bigger problem in your life, a significantly bigger problem. And, think of it from like the perspective of a man. What does that do to isithunzi sakho? What does that do to your self-confidence, the way you view yourself and that sort of stuff? It's just like, and that's someone who can speak to people and say, Kopela 5 up. What about that guy whose only communication with you is he's bored? Because you're not going to open your window, because then he's here and now you're uncomfortable. It's just, oh God, now I have to give you money. It's just, it's so unfortunate that, it gets to that point for people. It gets to the point where, you know, they have to stand at the corner and beg and beg. And the same party that's in power at the current moment, that's allowed for such circumstances, is going to come campaign and they're going to knock at your door.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, ha ha ha, vote for us one more time. Did you see that video of them going around? They went into someone's home. That lady was cooking and they took a fork and they started taking things out. Yeah, we're helping you cook. You know what I'm saying? In their bright colors. Where's the shame, bro? Where's the shame?
I saw the video of the girl that's speaking to Cyril, and she's looking for a job, and he's like, you must
Keep
look.
searching.
Yo, bro, that's like meeting Father Christmas. Yeah. That's like meeting Father Christmas, and then him telling you about the Easter Bunny. No, the Easter Bunny is taking CVs.
Let me tell you something. Hey, when he comes,
bro. So what you were saying, I get what you were saying, and okay, I'm gonna go on a tangent.
Let's go.
I get what you were saying.
Sure.
What you were saying is, we have as humans this ability to other people, you know?
Yeah.
And this happens at the micro level and at the macro level. At the micro level, it is that guy with the board, but you're not thinking about the dignity of that person.
That man.
You're not thinking about that. You're this bra. Kanjani. But then at the same time, there are different levels of us viewing that individual. You as Mchitomnyama and me as Mchitomnyama can see a friend or uncle or someone in that person. Yeah, we are still not willing to roll down the window, but we can see. You can see family. You can see blood. You can see someone in that person. And then there is another person, another observer of that individual that does not have a cultural link to that individual, that does not have a spiritual connection with that individual. To them, they are an other that is not an uncle or friend or whatever.
Just another
you
person.
know? At the macro level, there is the Western world and then there's the rest of us.
Okay.
At the macro level, there's the Western world and then there's the rest of us. We make the mistake of assuming that we are part of the Western world. We are not. Yeah. We are not. Because explain to me how in the 20th century, we had so many injustices for people that look like us. Yeah. And they were done in a world that existed, like we were saying before, it was a different time and different expectations.
Sure.
And so when in 1913, black ownership of land in South Africa was limited to 7%, who would object to that in 1913? When in Australia, the black Aborigines were considered they were actually classified as part of the fauna and flora of the country. They were not even classified as humans up until 1970 something. Again, in 1936, the 7% of ownership that was limited for black people was increased to 13%. And and it was called the Native Trust and Land Act, limited the ownership of black people in South Africa, in Africa, to 13%. And that was okay. Why? Because most of Africa and the world were under colonial rule. So who would object to that morally?
Would it make sense?
You know?
Yeah.
Again, we move on to the 50s and you have the Group Areas Act and Grand Apartheid of Verwoerd. And that was still okay. That was still okay.
It was allowed.
You know, it was allowed. Then we move on to 1989 with the deconstruction of apartheid and the negotiations to 94 with free elections and whatnot. But somehow something changed. What changed was in the previous years where it was possible and legal for certain things to be done, even though they were unjust to the majority.
Immoral. Yeah.
When we got to 94, the rule book changed.
Sure.
You know, at first you had a parliament that could just vote to do the things that I've mentioned and it would become law. In 94, you have a constitution that says you cannot do those things. Sure. Parliament cannot do anything that does not adhere to these rules.
Sure.
So what has happened? Parliament has been restricted to limited powers that just negates the freedom, the freedoms that we supposedly have gained. And that, to me, at the micro level, is the other that happened in the Western world, where it was okay to do 1913, 1936, and in the 1950s and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then post 94, that's not okay anymore. Why? Because it's us that are the ones that are not part of who us is when you're speaking about the Western world.
Yeah.
Now, Australia said a few years ago that if South Africa was to ever expropriate land without compensation, they would take in white South Africans.
White South Africans to come with them.
Like, where was that empathy when
when it was black South Africans?
So
sort of,
there is this othering that humans are able to do that happens at every level. Unfortunately for us, black South Africans, is at a less higher level with the ANC. They other us. They other us. Like, they don't see us as part of them. I read that book, After the Party, by Andrew Feinstein. Yeah. And he speaks about how within the National Party, within the ANC, there is a culture that you do not betray the party. You do not go against the party. When in the 90s and 2000s, there was so much push to get ARVs into the country. And Thabo Mbeki was just saying no. Yes, I understood the reasons.
What was his reasons?
The reasons that he proposed were there was not enough science to back up the treatment of the disease.
It was sort of like it wasn't as properly documented as it is now.
I mean, even to this day, there hasn't been really any academic papers that links the appearance of HIV and the condition that we call AIDS. Like, it's 2024, and in 2024. That is not to say that HIV does not cause AIDS. I do not know, but what he was saying back in the day was, let's have the empirical evidence that says that this thing is gonna help with this with this disease. And now, recently, one of the candidates that is running for the U.S. presidency, the nephew of JFK, wrote a book about Anthony Fauci. The doctor. What do they call that? The CDC.
It's like the country's doctor.
Yeah, basically. He wrote a book that showed how Anthony Fauci in the 70s and 80s pushed hard for ARVs to be the medicine to be given to HIV positive people, even though the ARVs that were available at that time were a backlog of medication that had been used in the 50s to treat cancer that had a fatality rate of almost 100%. So anyone that was prescribed this medicine died. And this dude wrote a book that says this, and he was not sued. So if I write a book about you and say Bongani is X, Y, and Z, and Bongani does not sue me, what does that say? I'm not lying then if I've stated these things that you are not willing to sue me. And so there's always this thing that unfortunately we miss, where we believe the official story. Like, we believe the story that has been given to us, that, okay, X, Y, and Z has been stated, and if you happen to be a typical average individual of a nation that has been raised to be obedient, you pay your taxes, you go to church, you trust your leaders, you trust the officials, that they are ethical people. When... Yo, bro, the politics of the stomach will corrupt anything.
Any single thing. But I think that's so unfortunate, right? Because, especially when you trust your leaders in a country like ours, there's so many facets to this, and I'm not entirely sure where to start. But it's like, South Africa has a problem on their hands in that you said, yes, the people that are in power have othered the rest of the country. And I think if you look at other African countries, excluding maybe Rwanda,
Paul Kagame.
what happens is as soon as a country gets, their liberation, and the resisting or the resistance movement, the party that led the resistance gets into power, something happens. Something very, very unfortunate happens. Mugabe was a fighter.
I know.
Mugabe was a fighter.
I know.
Mugabe fought for the liberation of Zimbabwe. You wouldn't believe that that's the man who was buried not too long ago, right? Because you could say maybe there's something corrupt that happens to the souls of these people when they are finally in positions of power, and you could argue that it's the same corruptness that caught the whatever party orchestrated the previous leadership of that country, or you could just say it's people that never had the country's best interests at heart, and eventually, once they were in positions of power, they were able to manifest that to the best of their abilities. It could be anything, but I just think, from where I'm standing, it just looks like there's been a terrible moral decay in society, and people in politics have not been exempt from that moral decay. And because of the positions that they hold, they are able to amplify and project it even further. Don't these guys feel shame? Don't they feel shame wearing that cap and the shirt and campaigning for a party that has done such devastating things to the people of this country?
They are able to do it because, like you say, they've othered us.
And you look at it, and it's funny. It's hilarious when you talk about people that are like, in the dating game that are dating actively. They're like, I'll never find a baddie. Why aren't you dating a baddie? Because they're all with the politicians. What you call it? Hypergamy.
Yeah.
Right? They have access to these things. And it's so sad that we've acclimatized to it. South Africa is full of so many crazy events that what shocks us these days? Like, when are you going to hear a story and you're going to go, I can't believe such a thing? Who's that? The lady that was arrested was the ANC. She was in cahoots. Was she the speaker?
Yeah, I think she was
in
the
cahoots
speaker
with the national defense minister. And it was just like, if someone in that position can get corruptible, it speaks to a bigger problem in the organization. The president of the party has had allegations with the farm and the money. No one knows where it is.
Bruh. There were early days within the ANC where, honestly, you could say, they were doing things. They were a party.
Remember Mbegi's economy?
Who, bro?
That man was.
Bro, who's this guy? Who was the minister of finance? Something Manuel, Trevor Manuel. Man, that bra held the country together with his policies. He really held the country together. There was hope in the ANC in the early 15 years, up until the Zuma. But then I'm torn when it comes to Zuma, because I'm old enough to remember how stupid they led us to believe Zuma was.
Hey, they convinced the country that this man is a fool. And it backfired.
Bro.
It backfired.
Bro, because during the Zuma years, I always say this to my friends that that Uzuma, the difference between Uzuma and Mbeki was, Uzuma was like a freedom fighter. Like, he was in the bushes, he was in the trenches, and Mbeki grew up in exile. He's an Anglophile. He grew up in Britain. And so you had someone who was exposed to recreational
sort of activities. He was the softer side of things.
Like he was probably he was given timeouts. He probably had art class, had literature reviews and all these things, had an appreciation for the arts. The finer things. And then you have another individual that was surviving, bro. Like he was getting an education on life. And unfortunately, the former of the two is more in line with what we talk about when we talk about Westerners.
Western, sure. Because he's more palatable. He can digest him.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing with Zuma is he really tried, but then his methods were not aligned with Western ideals, because universities were open during the Zuma years. Schools, high schools were open during the Zuma years. Bridges were built during the Zuma years.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a lot of corruption, but which country is devoid of corruption in this? In the US, corruption is even legal. They just call it lobbying. Yeah, like
they do.
Like they have lobbyists, bro. Like they have lobbyists that used to work for the government, and then they have sweet deals, like things happen, policies are passed, and then when they are out of government, all of a sudden they're working for the company that they used to regulate.
They're doing good.
And
they're doing good after that. Yeah.
So if they often say, if America sneezes, the world gets a cold, and that trickles down in everything. If America is corrupt, and it's just going to trickle down to the rest of us. But the thing is, unfortunately, is this thing of othering ourselves and being othered by others is we are not used to, or the world is not used to power in a certain packaging.
Sure. But I mean, look at what they did to Gaddafi.
Oh, I'm impressed. You know that,
right?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but I think we should be careful. When you said, yes, there was a lot of corruption, and then you said but. I don't like the but that comes after the yes that.
Look, between 1970 in South Africa and 1989, the South African military, on average, minimum, they were spending about 500 million rand on military spending.
Yeah.
And this is at a time when the rand was almost on par with the dollar.
Yeah.
There was a lot of dodginess happening back then. There was a lot of dodginess back then, bro. Like there's a white comedian, I forget his name, that used to wear in drag. They used to talk about the corruption that was happening under apartheid, bro. But then it was packaged in the right packaging, so it seemed official. It seemed official, because unfortunately we still live in a world where some people are just not used to seeing umdofana nam nawe in a position of standing. And if you are in a position of standing as umdofana nam nawe, something is dodgy. Something is dodgy. I had a neighbor in Cape Town that I work remotely. I indulge in some 420 from time to time. I am always in sweatpants and just comfortable clothing, just minding my own business.
Kicking it, man.
And I'm sure the impression that I would have even had of myself would have been a bit dodgy.
Who's
this guy constantly just chilling around? But I'm working. You don't see me when I'm working, but I'm working. So it's only when I don't have WhatsApp.
Sure.
But then there was an issue in the complex. Internet was down. And I'm in tech. I used to be a network engineer back then. So I'm like, guys, can I help?
Let's see.
Like, okay, cool, via email. They're like, why are you in the WhatsApp group? Now, I don't have WhatsApp. So I downloaded WhatsApp with my work number.
Sure.
Went in there and was in the WhatsApp group. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's see the outputs. Let's troubleshoot this.
Let's see what's up.
And within less than an hour, the internet was back up working again. The same neighbors that used to ignore my black ass, all of a sudden I'm getting hi. I'm getting eye contact now, where previously I would walk out. Bro, the distance between our doors was as wide as this table. I would walk out and his wife might be coming out or coming in or whatever, and it would be like there was no one there.
There's no one to acknowledge,
no one to acknowledge. The most
basic
disappointing encounter I had with those people was I was coming back from the gym on a Sunday, and I'm an atheist. So I'm coming back from the gym on a Sunday, and it happened to be Easter Sunday, and they coming out in their best Sunday fittings, There was like 5 or 6 of them. all of them, besides the guy, just ignored me. The guy like made eye contact with me and like, sure. And then everyone else was just like, it's a small corridor, and everyone else was just could look anywhere
but
my direction.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So we have this thing of othering each other, and when you are not from a specific culture, whatever you think of being fed of that culture is what you'll see when you see them. Yeah, so that's unfortunate.
Do you think we're ever going to solve for that, though? Do you think it's ever going to get to a point where it stops being the case, where it stops being...
No. Like you asked me earlier on how long humans have been around, and I mean, just the current science behind that says about 300,000 years based on the artifacts they found, the bones they found and whatnot. Okay, cool. That's a long time, bro. 300,000 years. That is a long ass time. And if we really appreciate how long that is, we have to compare it to the last 10,000 years that have brought us to having podcasts. You know, because we went from Sumeria, maybe 6,000 years ago. Yeah. They perfected agriculture. They perfected writing. They perfected so many different new sciences. And over the many thousands of years, we worked our way to the internet, we worked our way to the moon, we worked our way to this life that we live in. Yeah. And yet, it could all go away like that, and we'd start over.
And we'd be fine.
We'd be fine, but then the worst aspects of us would probably survive.
100%. No, but the worst... Jeez, so now we're going to touch into something. I feel like those are the people that are bound to survive.
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah.
It's like, I think we touched on this when we were there by Starbucks. It's like the people that are in positions of leadership, the people that have influence, the people that actually have the ability to make a difference aren't necessarily there because they're the best characters that were in their surroundings when that position opened up, right? There's a certain sort of psychopathic trait that successful people carry. It comes from, a really, really well established self-understanding and an understanding of others, and also just the keen eye to be able to identify what needs to be done and your abilities to do what needs to be done. It's an extreme sense of awareness, and I think once you develop that sense of awareness, it's important to keep yourself accountable, because there's nothing stopping you from turning into the other people.
There's a book behind you called Sapiens.
I need to get more books. You've pointed at 4 books since and I'm like, I'm not reading enough, bro.
Oh, man.
I'm not reading enough.
I also haven't been reading as much as I would like to, but that book, the author is Yuval Noah Harari. And he makes reference of a revolution in some former Soviet country in the 90s when the Soviet Union was falling apart.
Sure.
And he makes note of how the government that took over the Soviet government that was there were not really the best candidates to take over. They were not the most qualified. They were not even the most. They were not even the official opposition to the Soviet government that was there. Yeah. But one crucial thing that they had was proximity to the revolution that was happening. Yeah. They were there. They were within
the right spaces.
The right spaces.
At the right
when
room.
Everything was falling apart, that they just stepped into it and took over. While everyone else with the best intentions were like,
what's gonna happen?
I think it was Czechoslovakia where this happened. And it goes to what you were saying. 10,000 years ago, the guy that could look at a lion or whatever predator that was before him with a calm heartbeat, you know, in that face of danger, was the guy that was going to be the chief.
Sure, because he could,
you know, he could, in the 21st century, that means being the president during the lockdowns and looking at the teleprompter very calmly and saying, this is the best thing we can do right now.
At the moment.
Knowing people are going to lose their jobs, people are going to lose their lives, people's lives are going to be ruined, but you are saying this is going to be the best thing we can do right now. You know? Like, if you can do that, bruh, if you can do that,
but now wait. Now it sounds like you think that we didn't handle this lockdown the best way we could.
No, we didn't. We definitely didn't.
Where do you think we missed the mark?
I will make reference of the lockdown, and I'll make reference of the ICJ case that we have going on
against
currently.
Israel.
The South Africa that went into the lockdown is not the same South Africa that took a case to the ICJ. And I say this because the countries that went along with the narrative that had to be pushed and believed for the lockdowns to happen internationally are countries that were allied with a certain ideology coming from the US. You know? Okay, cool. It's fine. Now you have a South Africa that's taking a case to the ICJ. And obviously you are taking a case against one of the biggest allies that the US has. You know, you are being a thorn in the beautiful garden.
Backside.
You know, like you're being a thorn in the beautiful. For me, that signifies two things. At first, we were willing to go ahead with a very flawed messaging that came out from the US in the early days of the COVID pandemic.
Sure.
Where we were told social distancing, we were told vaccines, this and that are going to be the way we get out of this. Locking down is going to be the way that we get out of this. And yet we were not told about countries that didn't go with that, you know. Italy didn't go with that.
But I mean, remember what happened to Italy?
But then another thing that you have to remember with what happened to Italy eventually is that they have one of the oldest populations in Europe.
Sure.
You know? And so as much as not closing down ended up being a issue for them, that's not necessarily down to them not closing down because of other factors where they have one of the oldest populations in Europe, and they have a culture where most people only move out of their home when they get married. You know, it's a lot of people in like confined spaces. You're here together. So if you're not locked down and you're not social distancing, the young people are going out doing their thing, and then they're coming back, and then they infect the elders. You know? So that was detrimental to them specifically. But then there are other countries and states in the US that didn't go with that narrative. In the US, Texas and Florida, they didn't lock down. They just socially distanced, and people that were more high risk were given more attention. Sure. You know, and that worked for them. It worked for Texas, it worked for Florida. And then you have the extreme on that, where in California, everything was locked down, and people lost their livelihoods. People still died, but people lost their livelihoods. The policies did not meet what was needed on the ground, you know? South Africa went with that narrative that was coming out of the US along with the rest of the world, but then at the same time, South Africans didn't die in the numbers that were expected, or even Africans didn't die in the numbers that were expected. Because why? We are in a developing nation. Most people, even if they're old, your grandmother is walking 5 kilometers a day to get to bus whatever or madam's house. Healthier. You know, she's healthier. Sure. She eats healthier food. She's more active. You know, so the South Africa that went along with the lockdowns is not the same South Africa that would have taken a case to the ICJ, because the landscape changed now, where you have BRICS in a more powerful, or let's
They
say
have more influence.
yeah, they have more influence, more independence. You know, they can rely amongst themselves. We can trade amongst ourselves, and so the presence of China saying we are not going to take the position that the West has taken with Africa or the global South to say we are the headmasters and you are the pupils. We are your partners, and what you have, we will assist you in making best use of it. And with what we have, you can make best use of it. You know, there's more of a partnership in that coalition.
Yeah.
And because of that, it gives South Africa the ability to say, actually, we're going to do our own thing.
Yeah.
You know, what you are doing does not align with our core values, and the Palestinians are aligned with our history as South Africans. Because again, I was mentioning earlier on that South Africa was spending 500 million rand between 1970 and 1989 on military spending. And if you do a deep dive on that, some of that money was going to Israel at a time when it was not supposed to go to Israel. Why? Because South Africa was under a government that was very cozy with the US. You know, so the landscapes have changed. I don't know if I've answered your question.
You definitely have. But you see, now that's so interesting. I think I stand on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to COVID and how I feel like we handled it. I think maybe it's because I don't necessarily have the numbers that you've been exposed to with like Florida, and I think you said Miami was the second one, right?
Miami is in Florida, but it was Florida and Texas.
Florida and Texas, yeah. So it's just like, you know, I'm sure if the numbers support what you're saying, then there's no disputing that. But, you know, from what I saw and from where I'm sitting, I just struggled to find a reality where we had a communicable disease that spreads as easily as us having a conversation right now, and us preventing the spread of that disease in any other way. Do you know what I'm saying? But also you must acknowledge the fact that we as people, we're funny creatures, man. We're funny creatures. When the pandemic sort of became a thing, right? And it was clear, this is a bigger problem than we had been anticipating, and B, just, you know, prepared for in general, like in terms of our resources. It caused a sort of like a shock to humanity as a whole. And when we are in a state of panic and a state of shock, we tend to either fall to the level of our best systems, which could either be thinking, you know, breaking it down logically, or we take the religious route, which is, you know, very comforting. And now the religious conversation started. Oh no, the vaccine is, you know, a form of mind control. Yeah. They want to do this. They want to control the market. Hey, listen, man, I'm not gonna. That's your take, and that's your take. Yeah. I'm not gonna do it. But now it became difficult to control a population, and it sounds wrong. Why would you want to control a population? But it became difficult to set a unified sort of flow amongst people, because there was this division, there was this faction. People were believing at some point that the 5G towers were contributing to Lord knows what. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and I think the resistance that came from, you know, certain groups of people made it quite difficult to properly hone in on, you know, getting this disease in order. The people that didn't take vaccines will tell you, I didn't take it because I don't trust it.
That's me.
How do you disagree with that? This person doesn't trust it, and that's it.
That's definitely
Another
me.
person would have been like, listen, we've done the research. Here it is. What more are you looking for? We're showing you signs that countless people are going to die if you don't take this vaccine. So now these two people, they're never going to come to an agreement, because you don't trust it and you firmly believe that there was research for it. And you're not hearing my side, I'm not hearing your side. So you'll go on and do what you do, I'll go on and do what I do. And it's more difficult for a government to say, you know, like, how do you control those sort of things? So it's just like, man.
For me, it's like what we were talking about earlier on, where there are certain traits that politicians possess that are more akin to psychopaths than anything else.
So you think they were psychopathically lying to people?
Man. There's a part of me that says they did not know better. They did not know better, but they definitely lied. They lied about certain things. The first lie was that, what did Cupcake say? It was going to be 3 weeks. Initially, it was supposed to be 28 days, right? And then it ended up being a year and a half. For me, personally, as I've said, I'm an atheist. And I have not grown and matured within an ideology that requires me to be submissive to authority. And so it becomes easier for me to be curious and ask why,
let's inspect.
So when all of a sudden there were murmurs around it being
legitimacy,
like it being something that was going to be forced upon us. That was something scary for me. And I had COVID in the early days. I contracted COVID on the 10th of May. Was it March or May? Either March but it was the 10th of either March or May.
Sure.
And I was at a data center in Cape Town. I was there from about 10 a.m. until like 5 p.m. And while I was there, data centers are cold. So while I was there, I was working with this guy who, it was his first day there, and he had just moved from KZN, I think it was KZN, to Cape Town to start his first day there. And I was with this guy for a few hours, and it was a Friday, I think. Cool, so I'm done, go back home, enjoy my weekend. Monday, I get called, like, yo, are you well? Like, yeah, I'm good. And like, they actually, like, this is HR for my company, like, asking me, like, hey, how are you feeling? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm like, so weirded out. Why are you asking me how I'm feeling? And they basically like, yeah, so the guy that you were working with Friday tested positive for COVID. So we want to get you tested. I'm like, what? Okay, cool. I was scared, but I didn't know anything. Cool. The next day, I have an appointment. I go get tested. It's positive. Doctor tells me very calmly that most people don't have any symptoms, whatever. But if you do have a symptom, it will probably be like shortness of breath, or you might lose your taste. Okay, cool. So it was the Friday when I contracted COVID. Monday when I was informed that the person I was working with tested positive, and then Tuesday when I got my test, and then Thursday I got my first symptom, which I couldn't taste anything.
And that one, when it gets, it's a weird one. I remember that.
So I couldn't taste anything. I'm living alone. Everything is locked down. And I'm like, yo, okay, cool. Call my family, explain the situation. First call my older sister, because if I told my mom, she would freak out. So
panic.
But then the days went by, and that's it. I was like, really? Is this why we closed the country down? But then I knew people that actually died.
They did.
I knew people that actually died. And the thing that is not talked about the most is, like I mentioned, I work out, I run, I'm
healthy.
active, I'm healthy,
to manage.
And the people that were dying were either older or had pre-existing conditions. They had asthma.
It's not that COVID just took them.
Yeah, it's not just COVID. It was not just some healthy dude with whatever. I'm sure that happened, but most of the people that I know, like all the people that I know in my family and friends that died because of COVID, had some pre-existing condition. They were overweight. And that was not being given enough attention. I'm like, why?
So.
Why are we going to the stab in your arm first before addressing, And then the thing that was not even talked about even more after the fact was when people got the injection, all-cause mortalities around the world went up.
Really?
All-cause mortalities, anything that you could die of, went up after COVID. So people died of heart attacks, people died of strokes, people died of weird things, and there were people that had gotten the vaccine, and that is not giving enough attention. That as soon as you mention something like that, you know, on any platform, you know, like you are cancelled.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here. The solution that the vaccine brought wasn't necessarily a complete and total end to the deaths. It was a fighting chance improvement for anyone who could have contracted it. That's how I understood the vaccine. It wasn't going to stop the spread. It wasn't going to even, help you get quicker sooner. It just gave your body a fighting chance. And I think that's where I was coming from.
My thing is, I always follow where the money is going.
Sure.
I always follow the incentive.
Yeah.
And when I followed the incentive, I found that there were actually doctors out there, like doctors that are renowned in their fields, that were being discredited for pushing alternative treatments to COVID that were actually working. Yeah. You know, there is a medication that has been prescribed to people, or there have been billions of dosages that have been taken by people over the decades with this medication that had proved effective against COVID, that whenever anyone brought it up, they were belittled as being draconian and not believing the science and this and this and that. I'm like, again, it comes back to who I am. I have to question why is this the case? You know, why are renowned doctors who before COVID were, you know,
and now they're not.
And now they're not, because they are actually saying, this also works. You don't need to take this experimental thing. Yeah. This also works. You know, the most famous case is the Joe Rogan one, where where CNN were showing clips of him on TV where they used a filter to make him look orange, because supposedly he was taking horse medication, and he was not. He was taking a medication that sometimes is used on horses, but it's a medication that has been used by doctors for patients for decades, but they tried so hard to belittle any alternative to the official narrative that people have to go for, which is reminiscent of that book that I was mentioning earlier on. George Orwell's 1984. Sure. We live in a world where it does not resemble the dark days of Nazi Germany or anything like that, but there is a train of thought that if you are not willing to jump on, if you are not willing to jump on board, like you cannot exist
in this society.
In this society, you have to be deplatformed. You have to be silenced. I'm like, okay, cool. If we are silencing any alternative voices, what are we saying then? Like, because humans make progress through discourse. You know, you say your piece, I say my piece, and then we decide. You know, so if we are shunning one side and propping up another side, what are the motives behind that?
Who's being served? And why are they
like served? Who is getting rich is the question you should always ask.
Jeez, man, that money should be coming to me. That money should be coming to me.
But man, this has been a great conversation.
As always, man.
Thank you for being here. Where can people find you?
Find me on TikTok at Bongani. But it's not spelled normally, right? It's Bonguhni. Yeah.
UH.
Yeah.
Why?
Because Bongani was taken.
Okay.
That's the honest truth, right? Otherwise, it would have been at Bongani. But Bongani was taken, so it's Bonguhni.
And what's upcoming for you in 2024 that people should be looking out for?
Oh, man, I have to stay tight-lipped around that one. Yeah.
Big things.
Fingers crossed.
Big
I'm
things.
just say fingers crossed.
Ooh.
Let's see what comes together.
Okay.
And then you'll know about it in due time.
Okay.
You'll know about it
I
in
love
due
it.
time.
My brother, thank you for being here, man.
Hey, it's always love, man.
This was a
good.
great conversation.
Yeah, you've given me a lot to think about. I learned a new word too, hypergamy. I'm gonna find conversations to fit that one in. Like, so you know the hypergamy. It's in the numbers. So, but yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Sure.
Cool. What do we do? Cuts.